In a room where beauty commanded the air, she was a shadow that no one dared to notice. The ballroom was a glittering sea of crystal and candlelight, the ceiling a canopy of shimmering chandeliers that threw fractured rainbows across polished parquet floors. Gentlemen in meticulously tailored tailcoats whispered to one another, their eyes sharp with appraisal, while ladies in gowns of silk and satin floated past in measured steps, their laughter soft yet deliberately piercing. Each glance, each curtsy, was a performance in itself, a delicate ballet of power, influence, and subtle cruelty. She entered at the threshold, her gown modest, its pale hue drowned amidst the riot of jewel tones and lace. The bodice fit awkwardly, the hem slightly uneven, betraying the care she had taken in preparation. Her hair, arranged with simple pins, lacked the elaborate adornments fashionable among her peers. And yet, she walked with her head held as high as she could manage, forcing a composure that wavered at the edges under the relentless scrutiny. A ripple of whispers moved through the assembly like a faint breeze stirring the fine draperies. "Who is she?" one voice murmured, curious yet scornful. "Her dress, it is hardly appropriate for such an event," another remarked, a smirk dancing on her lips. She felt their eyes, not seeing her as a person, but measuring her worth in terms of beauty, inheritance, and connection. The weight of judgment pressed upon her like the cold London winter outside. From across the room he appeared. The Duke of London, a man whose visage had been the subject of countless portraits, whose presence commanded both awe and desire, surveyed the room with a languid air. His gaze, when it briefly fell upon her, lingered only a moment, an almost imperceptible pause that might have been curiosity, or merely the courtesy of a man used to attention. And then he turned away as if dismissing her entirely, leaving her to feel the sharp sting of invisibility. The orchestra swelled, violins and oboes weaving melodies that spoke of elegance, romance, and intrigue. She moved further into the crowd, each step measured, careful not to stumble or draw further ridicule. A lady brushed past, her fan flicking air across her face, leaving her cheeks burning with humiliation. She caught the reflection of herself in a gilded mirror, the pale figure standing alone amidst a sea of color, unnoticed and unremarkable. The realization struck her like ice. The ballroom, the spectacle, the glittering society around her, existed without room for someone like her. Yet beneath the flush of shame, a small ember of something unexpected stirred. In the briefest instant, the Duke's eyes had met hers, not in flirtation, not in jest, but in the faintest recognition. It was a look that might have been curiosity, a glimmer of attention that society would never permit to flourish. She clung to it as she retreated into the quiet of the shadows, heart pounding with a mixture of mortification and a seed of hope she scarcely dared acknowledge. Around her, laughter and whispers continued, oblivious to her inner turmoil. The orchestra shifted to a waltz, couples gliding in perfect harmony, while she lingered at the edge of the floor, unseen yet observing, cataloguing, remembering. Every glance of derision, every pointed murmur, deepened her awareness of the world she had entered, a world that valued beauty above all, that measured character by ornamentation and charm rather than courage or intellect. And yet, in the midst of rejection, she felt the faintest flicker of possibility. Perhaps, in time, the world might see her differently. Perhaps, in time, the man whose eyes had paused on her for a heartbeat would notice not only the surface, but the heart beneath. For now, she bowed her head, masking both shame and quiet determination, letting the music sweep her through the ballroom, a solitary figure adrift in a sea of elegance and cruelty. The night pressed on, glittering and indifferent, but in that moment, a silent tension took root, the tension of a woman unseen, a society poised to judge, and a duke whose interest, though fleeting, might prove the first crack in the walls that confined her. The stage was set, and the first act of her story was only beginning. Society delights in scandal, yet true hearts find the smallest token speaks louder than whispers. The days following the ballroom felt like a blur of muted color and muted voices. She moved through London streets with a careful grace, each carriage and lamp post a reminder of a world that measured her worth with merciless exactitude. Invitations arrived in delicate envelopes, their wax seals stamped with family crests she barely recognized. Garden parties, afternoon teas, dinners and gilded parlors, all venues where society's judgment awaited, cloaked in civility and measured smiles. She attended with the composure of one rehearsing a role she had not yet learned to inhabit, every curtsy and measured step a quiet rebellion against the eyes that sought to diminish her. And then the first token arrived. A small, exquisitely wrapped package, placed with discretion on her doorstep. Inside lay a necklace of subtle design, a single rose carved from coral, accompanied by a slip of paper upon which a few words were inscribed in a hand both familiar and impossible to trace. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. For the one who walks unseen, yet carries a light none else can perceive. Gossip moved swiftly. In drawing rooms scented with rosewater and heated by parlor fires, whispers spread like wildfire. A gift from whom? Surely scandal must be involved. Perhaps she has caught the eye of someone, indiscreet. The ladies of society exchanged knowing glances, each speculation sharpening the sting of judgment. She herself felt the pang of embarrassment, yet beneath it, a strange warmth, proof that someone somewhere had noticed her not as the world did, but in a way that mattered. The Duke of London, unspoken in the rumors but ever present in the mind of society, began appearing at the same functions she attended. Not with grand gestures, but in subtle observances. A nod of recognition, a discreet smile, an offer of his arm when propriety demanded politeness. Each act, while small, sparked curiosity among those eager to manufacture intrigue. Every glance she caught from him seemed to pulse with meaning, yet she questioned its truth, wary of misinterpreting the gestures of a man accustomed to admiration. One afternoon, at a tea hosted in a greenhouse filled with the scent of jasmine and the soft rustle of ferns, she discovered another token, a pressed violet, delicate and pale, placed between the pages of a book she had borrowed. It was a quiet intrusion into her private world, a declaration made in secrecy, daring enough to defy society's scrutiny. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of alarm and delight, realizing that someone's attention could both elevate and endanger her. Rumors intensified, of course. Gentlemen speculated, ladies disapproved, and whispers grew sharper, weaving a tapestry of imagined improprieties. Yet she moved through it with increasing poise, learning that dignity could be a shield as formidable as any gown or jewel. Each token became a reminder, she was not entirely invisible, and even the harshest society could not erase the smallest flickers of admiration. In these days she began to observe the Duke more closely, noting the subtle consistencies in his attention, the way he lingered in conversation just long enough, the fleeting protection in his gaze, the quiet respect in his actions. Society might brand him capricious, indulgent, or scandalous, but in truth, his gestures carried a sincerity that unsettled her heart and stirred an unspoken hope. By the time the first winter frost tinged the window panes, a delicate tension had formed. Tokens of affection danced amidst society's gossip. Private gestures collided with public scrutiny, and she, standing between the worlds of judgment and devotion, began to understand the delicate balance required to survive, and perhaps to flourish. The ember of hope, once flickering, now glowed with a fragile persistence, signaling that the path ahead would be as treacherous as it was intoxicating, and that the coming revelations would test the courage and heart she was only just beginning to trust. To speak one truth in a world of masks is to be both brave and undone. The winter garden was hushed beneath a silvered sky, the wrought iron benches dusted with frost, the brittle branches of trees outlined in delicate white. Steam rose from her breath in soft clouds as she wandered along the gravel paths, hands gloved, heart unsettled by the relentless tide of whispers that had accompanied her since the first token appeared. The city beyond was muffled, distant, as though this secluded corner existed outside the bounds of judgment and expectation, a rare sanctuary where propriety could relax its rigid hold, if only slightly. He emerged from the shadow of a laurel arch, the Duke of London, his figure tall and commanding even in the dim winter light. He approached with a deliberate calm, the faintest smile playing upon his lips, eyes searching hers with an intensity that demanded both honesty and courage. Society's walls were gone here. No parlors, no gossiping ladies, no curious glances, only the raw, unspoken reality of two hearts in quiet collision. "I have watched you," he began, his voice low and measured, "as the world has turned from you. And yet, I see what they cannot or will not. Your courage, your wit, your quiet strength." She paused, the words halting her steps, her heart caught in the tension between disbelief and longing. Every whispered insult, every stifled laugh from the ballroom, pressed upon her memory, and yet here was a man whose attention was not perfunctory, nor guided by fleeting desire, but by genuine recognition. "I," she faltered, glancing toward the frosted branches, unsure if her voice could carry the truth she had scarcely admitted to herself. "I have learned to walk unseen. It is safer so. To hope, even quietly, invites cruelty." He stepped closer, the faint crunch of gravel beneath his boots punctuating the stillness. "Perhaps it is the cruelty of the world that has made you luminous to me. I see you, not merely the reflection in society's mirror, but the soul beneath it." His gloved hand brushed lightly against hers, not in familiarity, but as a gentle confirmation that his words were not a jest. The confession settled around her like the first snow, both shocking and inevitable. A strange mixture of fear and exhilaration coursed through her veins. She had spent years inhabiting the shadows, training herself to endure, to hide, to be unseen. And yet, in this quiet moment, recognition and desire intertwined, challenging every lesson she had learned. Do I dare trust such words?" she asked, voice trembling with the weight of both hope and apprehension. He held her gaze with unwavering sincerity. "Trust is not given lightly, nor should it be. But I swear that my regard is not a fleeting fancy. I see you as you are, and it is more than any society's verdict could ever offer." For a long moment, the garden seemed to hold its breath. The brittle winter air, the frozen branches, the frost-laden paths, all witnesses to a revelation that might alter the course of two lives. She drew in a trembling breath, realizing that the world she had endured, with its whispers and judgment, had not extinguished the spark of connection now blazing in quiet defiance. As he stepped back, allowing space yet maintaining presence, a delicate tension lingered, between fear and desire, caution and hope, concealment and revelation. The private confession had shifted the balance. No longer merely invisible, she had been seen. No longer merely enduring, she had been acknowledged. And the garden, cold yet intimate, held the promise that what society scorned might yet be celebrated, should courage and honesty guide the heart. With one final lingering glance, he departed down the frost-lined path, leaving her with a single truth that would echo in every subsequent moment. To be recognized truly was both terrifying and irrevocably thrilling, and the story of their connection was only just beginning. "I have waited my whole life to see you not as the world sees you, but as you are, undimmed, unparalleled." The grand ballroom shimmered with candlelight, gilded mirrors reflecting chandeliers that poured golden illumination across polished floors. Music wove a delicate spell, violins and cellos tracing patterns of expectation and elegance, yet she felt none of the usual anxiety that accompanied such gatherings. Tonight, she moved not as a timid observer of society's gaze, but as a woman who had endured, observed, and quietly mastered the art of dignity. Her gown, simple yet refined, caught the light just enough to suggest grace without ostentation, and her posture, unshakable, spoke of a quiet triumph over months of ridicule. Eyes turned, some curious, some envious, but none could unsettle her. Each step she took toward the center of the hall was a statement. She was present, she was counted, and she was no longer invisible. The murmurs of society became a distant hum, irrelevant to the truth that had taken root in her heart. Across the polished floor, he waited, the Duke of London, his expression calm yet imbued with intent. No longer merely observing, he had arrived to claim a presence that society might scoff at, but which carried the undeniable weight of recognition and devotion. He approached, each movement deliberate, magnetic, drawing the eyes of all without needing to demand attention. She felt the air change as he closed the distance, the orchestra swelling in harmony with the tension that had built unseen for months. When he spoke, his voice cut through the ambient chatter like a precise note in a symphony, carrying with it sincerity and courage. "I have watched the world turn from you, yet in every glance, in every silent act of perseverance, I have seen your worth. I see you now as you are, and it is more than the world could ever comprehend." Her breath caught, not from fear but from the impossible clarity of his words. Society had measured her by silks, by the fleeting standards of beauty, by whispers that sought to diminish her. Yet here, in this decisive moment, a man whose admiration had once been distant now declared her value in no uncertain terms. She could meet eyes, return the steadiness in his gaze, and for the first time, allow herself the luxury of acceptance, not of society's shallow judgment, but of a recognition earned and deliberate. He extended his hand and she took it, the connection electric yet understated, a collision of longing and resolve. The ballroom seemed suspended, every flicker of candlelight, every glance of curiosity, frozen in witness to a union that transcended gossip and expectation. In that gesture lay months of tokens, stolen moments, private glances, and the quiet accumulation of courage. The tension that had thrummed beneath the surface now resolved in the unmistakable declaration of mutual understanding and affection. Music swelled as if in approval, couples turning in practiced steps, oblivious to the quiet triumph occurring at their center. She realized with an almost startling clarity that the victory was not in public acknowledgement alone, but in her own emergence from the shadows of doubt and humiliation. Every whispered insult, every pointed glance, Every fleeting moment of invisibility had led to this declaration, this incontrovertible recognition of her worth. The Duke's voice, low and unwavering, whispered as they drew together, "You are my world, seen and unseen, yet wholly undeniable." The words carried the finality of confession and the audacity of love unbound by the constraints of society. She met them with a calm smile, the hint of tears glimmering, not from shame but from triumph. In the aftermath, whispers persisted, of course, but they no longer mattered. She had claimed her dignity, her voice, and her right to be desired on her own terms. Society could observe, speculate, or disapprove. It could not undo the courage, the integrity, or the heart that had brought her to this moment. And in that ballroom, golden light shimmering on polished floors, two lives aligned in truth, passion, and the undeniable force of recognition, forever altering the course of both their worlds. In the memory of the world, she was once invisible, but to him she became everything. The winter sun had softened into a golden haze, spilling through the tall windows of the grand hall, illuminating polished floors and the faces of a society assembled in hushed anticipation. Tonight was no ordinary gathering. It was the culmination of months of whispered scrutiny, stolen glances, and the delicate dance between expectation and desire. She stepped into the hall with quiet assurance, the subtle confidence of one who had weathered ridicule and emerged tempered, her gown modest yet elegant, her eyes bright with self-possession. The room, a glittering sea of silks and satins, seemed suddenly smaller, as if the very air had shifted to acknowledge her presence. All around, whispers flickered and flared. Gentlemen nudged one another, uncertain, while ladies clutched fans and exchanged knowing glances. The rumor mill had been relentless, tokens, poetry, stolen moments of attention, but none had anticipated the force with which dignity and courage could demand recognition. She walked with measured steps, each one an assertion that her worth was neither defined nor diminished by the idle talk of society. From across the room he emerged, the Duke of London. His presence, long a subject of admiration and fear, now carried something entirely different, intention. Eyes that had once merely appraised now sought, recognized, and affirmed. Without preamble, he approached, his every movement commanding attention yet bending it entirely toward her. Murmurs fell away, and for a suspended heartbeat, the grandeur of the hall, the weight of judgment, the rigidity of tradition, all of it, ceased to matter. "I have waited my whole life to see you not as the world sees you, but as you are, undimmed, unparalleled," he declared, his voice carrying across the hall with both gravity and warmth. The words were neither boast nor theatrics. They were an anchor in a storm of societal expectation, a declaration that neither beauty nor rumor could overshadow truth. She met his gaze, and for the first time, the invisible chains of humiliation and doubt fell away, leaving only the raw clarity of connection. The hall seemed to hold its breath as he extended his hand. She took it, the smallest gesture resonating with monumental significance. Music swelled, couples turned in their dances, and yet their steps felt irrelevant, for the world had narrowed to the space between their hands and the unspoken promise in their eyes. Society could look, could whisper, could judge, but it could not undo the affirmation of what had long been silently understood. Two hearts aligned, recognition earned, love declared. The climax was quiet, intimate in its power. No grand proclamation beyond his words was needed. No gesture of dominance or display of wealth could match the triumph of dignity embraced and validated. She had survived ridicule, endured isolation, and navigated the treacherous waters of gossip, and now she stood acknowledged, desired, and unwavering. Weeks later, as the frost receded and London's streets shimmered in the early spring light, the memory of that night lingered like the last note of a cherished melody. She walked through the city with unhurried grace, her presence commanding neither envy nor scorn, but quiet admiration. He was at her side, not as a protector in the shadows of judgment, but as a partner in the open, their shared glances and unspoken conversations a testament to the depth of understanding forged in adversity. Society, ever eager to brand, had little choice but to adjust its narrative. Stories of scandal gave way to admiration. Whispers of ridicule were replaced by recognition of her fortitude and charm. She had transformed not by artifice, but by enduring with integrity, by allowing herself to be seen in truth rather than pretense. And he, once a figure of unattainable beauty and distant admiration, had become her mirror, her equal, her devoted witness. As they departed the city for quieter vistas, the narrator's voice lingers. The world may never fully remember the cruelty that once sought to diminish her, but in the heart of one man, and in the quiet triumph of a woman who refused invisibility, her legacy was etched irrevocably. She had been invisible once, and now she was everything, seen, cherished, and enduring beyond the fleeting judgments of society. The streets lay calm beneath the early sun, carriage wheels turning softly over cobblestones, and the couple disappeared into the morning mist, a testament to courage, love, and the enduring truth that recognition, when earned through integrity and grace, can outshine even the most glittering of society's illusions.